Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Ike's Political Minute. Now, today we will be simulating an election that will probably never happen. Yeah, I can almost guarantee you of that. But it is just a play on the fact that Russia has just slid into civil war. As of yesterday, anyway, with Yevgeni Prigozhin leading the charge. So now we're going to simulate how that civil war would play out in the United States if Yevgeny Prigozhin, the Democrat, faced Vladimir Putin, the Republican. And the reason I chose those two people as they did is because Vladimir Putin represents more of the establishment or the elite and just really maintaining the status quo, while Yevgeny Prigozhin is the insurgent. And generally, throughout global politics, the right wing means stability and the left wing means change. And this is certainly true in Prigozhin's case. Like, even on May 3rd, which is when this article was published, over a month before now, the New Yorker tells us that Prigozhin is much more than political dangerous. He has split elites, attacks the pillars of the regime, such as the army, and challenged Putin's appointees, and even the presidential administration using his own armed militias and his media allies. He has a much more radical agenda than is usually allowed to spread in the informational space. And yet, he remains untouchable, thanks to only Putin personally. He, I will repeat, he has a more radical agenda. Prigozhin is an outsider who's pushing for change. He is like the Donald Trump or Bernie Sanders of Russia, pushing for even more change than even the traditional establishmentarianism ever could have been. To say that Prigozhin is more of a Western person is just completely false. He is like ultra Russian. He is like the Putin on steroids. So honestly, I'm not even sure that this would be a traditional Democrat versus Republican map. I think that what this would come down to is establishment versus anti establishment. And I think it could produce some pretty interesting results. Now, right here, I think that Yevgeny Prigozhin would lock down Washington, Oregon, and Hawaii because they're all radically Democrat and anti establishment. Call me crazy, I think Vladimir Putin would narrowly carry California because California is full of a lot of elites, like in Silicon Valley. And California is a place for the rich or the poor. It's hard to live there as a middle class citizen with all of the costs. And I think that a lot of them would be spooked by Yevgeny Prigozhin, so they would go to Putin. Alaska, because it's really close to Russia, they would go to Putin. I think that Prigozhin would win in Nevada because, again, they're pretty anti establishment, and I think that the West, they're all pretty traditional, and I would even say Arizona and Colorado, even by a narrow margin, they're pretty traditional, pretty status quo, so I would say that Putin would lock down these areas. However, I think that these areas, especially Texas and its neighboring states, they're more populist, so I think that Yevgeny Prigozhin would narrowly carry Texas. I think that Oklahoma would go to Vladimir Putin, but just narrowly. It's a pretty populous state. And I think that Prigozhin would narrowly carry New Mexico, just because it's pretty similar to Texas that way. And I think that the Midwest is somewhere where Yevgeny Prigozhin would do really well because they love their outsiders. I think that he would score narrow wins in Iowa and Ohio, and he would lock down the other Rust Belt states, winning by likely margins in Wisconsin, Michigan, and a safe margin in Minnesota, and also likely in Pennsylvania. And the South, this is where you like more of your establishment people. Like even Ron DeSantis, you see him as an outsider, but he was more experienced. And especially with the South being the Bible Belt, I think that they would want somebody a little more orthodox, a little more palatable to the normal voter, like Vladimir Putin. Like Virginia, they love their Washington insiders. I would say that goes narrowly to Vladimir Putin. And outside of that, I think Putin wins Florida by a likely margin and he wins Georgia and North Carolina by likely margins, and the rest of the states by safe margins. Though I actually think that Yevgeny Prigozhin would win West Virginia narrowly, just because West Virginia is extremely populist. They have workers and they want their insurgent candidates, and I think that Prigozhin would provide that to them. I also think that Vladimir Putin would narrowly win Indiana and with it the election because, again, he is really focused on keeping traditions in line, keeping values. And although Indiana also has its fair share of factory workers, I don't think that that would be enough to overcome Putin's appeal there. I also think that Prigozhin would keep the states of Maryland, Delaware, New Jersey, and DC just because these states have generally always been Democrat. And, well, actually, Maryland, I'm going to narrowly give to Vladimir Putin for the same reasons that I gave Virginia, just because it's really close to the capital and they like their Washington insiders. And I think that Prigozhin would generally win the rest of the Northeast, even Maine's 2nd congressional district, because they really like their outsiders candidates. It's otherwise a solidly blue area, and that's how I think it would turn out. So, yeah, very interesting map. 256 for Yevgeni Prigozhin and 282 electoral votes for Vladimir Putin. Very interesting to see how it plays out, and yeah, actually, let's hope that this never happens. I would hate it if either of these two people were president, like, honestly. Anyway, thank you all for watching this video. Comment down suggestions below, like this video and subscribe, and propose any future videos, and I will see you all later.